In the center of the galaxy, far beyond any single star system, there was a place where all powerful species gathered. It was called the Galactic Council. For thousands of years, this council had one purpose: to control war and keep balance among the stars. But war never truly ended. It only became bigger, stronger, and more dangerous. Entire planets were destroyed in seconds, civilizations disappeared without warning, and fear spread across every system. So one day, the council made a final decision. A decision that would change everything. They would ban war completely. Every species agreed, except one: humans. Humans had joined the galaxy much later than others, but in a very short time, they became something no one expected. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, and not the most advanced, but they were unpredictable. Where others followed rules, humans broke them. Where others used strength, humans used strategy. Where others stopped, humans adapted. The council had seen enough. In their records, human wars were different. They were messy, creative, and impossible to control. Even when humans lost, they somehow changed the battlefield itself. That made them dangerous. So, the council did not just ban war. They banned humans from war. Humanity is no longer allowed to take part in any form of conflict, the council announced. No weapons, no armies, no strategies, no influence. The decision spread across the galaxy in seconds. Some species felt relief, some felt satisfaction, and some felt fear, because they knew something others did not. You cannot simply remove humans from war. On Earth, the news arrived quietly. There were no riots, no loud protests, no visible anger. That was the strange part. Humans accepted the decision. At least, on the surface, in a small control room deep under a human city, a group of people sat in silence. They watched the council's message again and again. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, one man leaned forward, his face calm, but his eyes sharp. "So that's it," he said softly. "They think war is only weapons," another person asked. "What do we do now?" The man smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "We follow their rules," he said. "But we also changed the game." Across Earth, things began to change. Military bases did not shut down. They transformed. Weapons were no longer built, but systems were. Artificial intelligence programs became more advanced. Engineers started working on communication networks, data control, and deep space signals. No one called it war, because it wasn't. At least, not anymore. Months passed. The galaxy felt peaceful for the first time in centuries. No major conflicts, no large battles, no destruction. The council celebrated their success. They believed they had saved the galaxy. But then, something strange happened. A powerful alien fleet, one of the strongest in the outer systems, suddenly disappeared. No distress signal, no battle report, no warning. It was simply gone. Search teams were sent. They found nothing. No wreckage, no survivors, no enemies. It was as if the fleet had never existed. The council was confused. How can an entire fleet vanish? One member asked. There was no war. Another said war is banned, but deep inside, doubt began to grow. Because this did not feel like peace. It felt like something else. Back on Earth, in that same control room, the screens were full of data. Signals moved silently across the galaxy, systems connected, networks expanded. The same man stood there, watching everything. "Phase 1 is complete," someone reported. He nodded slowly. "Good, remember, we are not breaking any rules," he said calmly. "We are not fighting." He looked at the stars displayed on the screen. But they never said we could not think. Far away, in the halls of the Galactic Council, fear slowly replaced confidence, because for the first time, they realized something important. They had banned human weapons, but they had not banned human minds, and that was a mistake. The galaxy believed that danger had passed, war was gone, humans were silent. And peace finally had a chance to grow, but silence is not always peace. Sometimes, silence is preparation. Across human space, nothing looked unusual from the outside. Cities were calm, trade routes were active, and no weapons were being built. Everything followed the Council's rules perfectly, but deep below the surface, something very different was happening. Hidden facilities expanded quietly. They were not military bases anymore, they were something new, rooms filled with glowing screens. Endless streams of data, and machines that never slept. Engineers, coders, and scientists worked side by side, not to build guns or ships, but to build control. Control over information, control over systems. Control over the unseen layers of the galaxy. Humans had stopped fighting battles, now they were studying them. Every past war, every strategy, every mistake made by every species, they collected everything, analyzed everything, improved everything, and then they changed everything. In one of the largest underground facilities on Earth, the same man from before stood in front of a massive display. It showed the entire galaxy, not just stars and planets, but connections, signals, pathways of communication. Every system was linked in ways no one else could see. "Status report," he said calmly. A young woman looked up from her console. "Phase 2 is progressing smoothly," she replied. "We have access to 12% of outer system networks." "Inner systems?" he asked. She paused for a moment. "Not yet." "But we are close," he nodded. "Good, take your time. We are not in a hurry." That was the difference. Other species rushed, humans waited, days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Strange problems began appearing across the galaxy, small at first. A cargo ship losing its navigation for a few seconds, a defense system shutting down for no reason. A communication delay that should not exist. Nothing serious, nothing that looked like an attack, just errors, the Council noticed, but they were not worried. "Minor system faults," one member said. "Normal after such a large transition to peace." Another agreed, but the errors did not stop. They grew, slowly, carefully, like something was testing limits. Learning, adapting, in human space, the control room was more active than ever. Streams of alien data flowed across human systems. Languages translated instantly. Defense protocols mapped and understood. Weaknesses identified, but no one called them weaknesses. They called them opportunities. "We are inside their communication grid," someone reported. "No detection." The man asked. "None." He allowed himself a small nod. "Good. Remember, we do not damage anything." He reminded them, "We observe, we learn, we prepare." A young engineer looked confused. "If we are not attacking, then what are we doing?" The man turned to him, his expression calm but serious. "We are changing the battlefield," he said. The engineer frowned. "But there is no battlefield." The man gave a slight smile. "Exactly, far away, in a distant system, an advanced alien station suddenly went offline, for exactly 3 seconds. Then it came back. Everything seemed normal, except one thing. A small piece of code had been left behind, invisible, silent, waiting. The station continued its operations without noticing anything. But it was no longer fully in control of itself, and it was not alone, one by one. Systems across the galaxy experienced the same thing: short blackouts, tiny delays, small glitches. Each time, something new was added, something hidden, something human, back in the council chamber. Concern slowly turned into tension. "This is not random," one member said. "These patterns are too precise." "But there is no sign of war," another argued. "No ships, no weapons, no attacks. Then what is this?" The first one asked. No one had an answer. Because they were still thinking about war the old way, they were looking for enemies they could see. Meanwhile, humans were everywhere they could not see. On Earth, the network map had changed. More lines, more connections, more control. The galaxy was slowly becoming connected through human design. Phase 2 is nearly complete, the woman reported. The man stepped closer to the display. His eyes moved across the web of systems. Good, he said quietly. Soon, they will understand. Understand what? She asked. He looked at her. That war does not need weapons. He turned back to the screen. It only needs control, in the silent depths of space. Signals moved without sound, systems responded without knowing why, and the galaxy continued. To believe it was at peace, but in truth, something had already begun. Something quiet, something invisible, something human, and when it finally revealed itself, it would not look like war, but it would feel far worse. The first true sin did not look like war. It did not begin with fire, or explosions, or ships attacking in the dark. It began with silence, deep in the outer systems. Far from the center of the galaxy, a powerful alien fleet was moving through. Empty space, they were known as one of the strongest forces ever built. Hundreds of warships, advanced weapons, perfect coordination, they had never lost a battle. But this time, they were not going to war, because war no longer existed. They were simply traveling, escorting valuable resources back to their home. System. Everything was calm, everything was normal, until it wasn't. Navigation check? The fleet commander ordered. All systems normal, the officer replied. Communication? Stable. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. Then one ship slowed down. Just a little, barely noticeable. Report, the commander said. Minor delay in engine response. Came the answer, fix it. But before they could react, another ship showed the same issue, then another, within seconds. Small errors began spreading across the fleet. Nothing dangerous, just wrong. Reset the system, the commander ordered. We are trying, the crew replied. But the systems did not respond correctly. Commands were delayed, signals overlapped. Screens flickered for a second too long. Confusion began to grow. This should not be happening, one officer said. Our systems are perfect. The commander frowned. There is no such thing as perfect, he said. Then suddenly, communication between ships cut out. Not completely, just enough to cause chaos. Messages arrived late, or incomplete. Ships started adjusting their positions at the wrong time. The perfect formation began to break, restore full control. The commander shouted, but no one answered properly, because no one fully understood what was happening, far away, on Earth. The control room was completely silent. Everyone was watching the same screen. The alien fleet was displayed as a cluster of lights, each one moving slightly out of place. Phase 3 has begun, the woman said quietly. The man stood with his hands behind his back. Do not interfere too much, he said. Let them react. But they are losing control, Son said. Yes, the man replied calmly. That is the point. Back in space, the situation was getting worse. Ships began to receive false data. Distances appeared shorter than they were. Speeds appeared slower than reality. Two ships moved too close to each other. Stop engines, one captain ordered. But the command arrived too late. The ships collided, not violently, but enough to damage both. Shock spread across the fleet. This is impossible, an officer whispered. We are not under attack. Then what is this? Another asked. No answer came, because there was no visible enemy. No weapons, no missiles. No ships in sight. Only failure. System by system. Control was slipping away. Navigation collapsed completely. Ships could not tell where they were. Communication turned into noise, And then, something even worse happened. The fleet's central command system shut down. For 5 seconds, only 5, but it was enough, without central control. Every ship acted on its last command. Some slowed down, some turned, some tried to stop. The formation broke entirely. Panic replaced discipline, manual control. The commander ordered, but even manual systems were affected. Because they were not truly manual anymore, they were connected, and that connection was no longer theirs. On Earth, a quiet voice spoke. Full access achieved. The room remained calm. No cheering, no excitement, only focus. The man looked at the screen. Now, end it, he said. A few commands were entered. Nothing dramatic, no explosions, no bright lights, just silence. Back in space. One by one, the ships powered down. Not destroyed, not attacked. Just turned off. Life support remained active, but everything else stopped. Weapons offline, engines dead. Systems unresponsive, the fleet drifted in. Space, alive, but completely helpless. Hours later, rescue teams arrived. They expected to find destruction. Instead, they found something far more disturbing: an entire fleet. Perfectly intact, but unable to move, unable to fight, unable to function. The crews were shaken, confused, and afraid. "We were not attacked," one survivor said. "We just lost control." Back at the Galactic Council, the news spread. Quickly, an entire fleet had been neutralized without a single shot. "This breaks the law," one member said, "but there was no war." Another replied, "No weapons were used. No enemy was seen." The chamber fell silent. Because they could not define what had happened. And that made it more dangerous than anything before. On Earth, the control room lights dimmed. Slightly as systems powered down. "Phase 3, complete," the woman reported. The man nodded slowly. "Good, send a signal," he said. "What kind of signal?" she asked. He looked at the stars on the screen. "A quiet one," he said. Just enough for them to notice. Moments later, deep inside the disabled fleet's systems, a single line of code appeared, simple, clear, and impossible to trace. "We did not attack. We only took control." Across the galaxy, fear began to spread. Because for the first time, everyone understood one thing: this was not a failure, this was a message. And the message was clear: humans had not returned to war. They had become something else entirely, something no one knew how to stop. No alarms announced the beginning. No fleets gathered. No weapons charged. No leaders declared battle. And yet, the war had already started. The galaxy just could not see it. After the first incident, fear spread faster than any ship could travel. An entire fleet had been stopped without damage, without fire, without a single visible enemy. It did not make sense, and that was the most dangerous part. At the Galactic Council, emergency meetings continued without rest. "This is an attack," one member said firmly, "but it does not follow any known form of war." Another replied, "Then we define a new one," a third said. But even as they spoke, their systems flickered for a moment. Just 1 second, barely noticeable. But enough to create silence in the chamber, because now it was happening to them too. Across the galaxy, similar events began to appear. Defense grids shut down for a few seconds, navigation systems gave slightly wrong directions, communication signals arrived too early or too late. Each problem was small, each one could be ignored, but together they formed a pattern no one could fully understand. In one system, a mining station suddenly stopped working, machines froze, controls became unresponsive, and automated systems failed. Workers stood helpless as everything around them simply stopped. Then, just as suddenly, it all came back. No damage, no loss. But something had changed. The station was no longer fully under their control. Far away, in another system, a military defense grid activated on its own, targeting empty space, firing at nothing, wasting energy, creating confusion. Officers rushed to shut it down. But commands were delayed, as if something was slowing them down. On purpose, back on Earth, the control room was alive with activity. Streams of data moved like rivers across the screens. Every system, every signal, every connection was mapped in real time. The galaxy was no longer a collection of separate worlds. It was becoming one network, and humans were at the center of it. "Report," the man said calmly. "We now have influence over 37% of active systems." The woman replied, "Influence, not control," she added carefully. He nodded. "That is enough?" A young technician looked at the screen, clearly nervous. "This is spreading fast," he said. "Should we slow down?" The man shook his head. "No, we are not spreading," he said quietly. "They are connecting themselves." The technician frowned, not understanding. "They built this network," the man explained. "They made everything dependent on it. We are simply using what already exists." In the council chamber, Pangaea was slowly replacing control. "We must isolate our systems," one member suggested. "Disconnect everything," another member shook their head. "If we do that, we lose communication, navigation, trade." "Everything? Then what choice do we have?" No one answered, because every option came with a cost, and every second they waited, the situation grew worse. In the outer systems, ships began reporting strange behavior, engines responding slower than usual, weapons locking onto incorrect targets, sensors showing objects that were not there. Crews were trained for battle, but this was not battle. This was confusion. This was loss of trust in their own systems. "How do we fight something we cannot see?" one captain asked. No one had an answer, because there was nothing to fight. No enemy ships, no weapons, only invisible control. Back on Earth, the man stood alone for a moment, staring at the massive display. Lines of connections spread across the galaxy. Like a web, every second, more lines appeared, more systems linked. More control gained? "Phase 4, he said softly. The woman stepped beside him. "Are we ready?" she asked. He took a slow breath. "Yes, begin controlled disruption," he ordered. Across the galaxy, the invisible war changed. It was no longer just small errors, now it was targeted, precise. In one system, an entire trade route collapsed. As navigation data failed, ships were forced to stop, supplies were delayed, economies slowed down. In another system, defense systems locked themselves, refusing all commands, leaving planets exposed, but no attack came. Only the feeling of vulnerability, only the knowledge that they were no longer in control. At the council, fear finally turned into realization. "This is not random," one member said. "This is control, and it is everywhere," another added. A long silence filled the chamber. Then one voice spoke, quiet but clear. "Humans." No one argued. Because deep down, they all knew, only humans could think like this. Only humans would follow the rules and still win. On Earth, the systems continued to expand. Everything was working exactly as planned. No resistance detected. The woman reported. The man nodded. "They cannot resist what they do not understand," he said. He looked at the screen. "One more time. This is not war as they know it. It is something better, something cleaner, something invisible." In the depths of space, fleets moved carefully, unsure of their own systems. Planets waited in silence, unsure of their defenses, and the galaxy finally understood one terrifying truth. The war was real, but it had no face, no sound, no sound, no warning, and no escape. Because the enemy was not coming from outside. It was already inside everything, and it was only getting stronger. For a long time, the galaxy searched for an enemy it could see. Ships scanned empty space, weapons stayed ready, and fleets waited for an attack that never came. But the real truth was far more dangerous, because the enemy was never outside. It was already inside everything. After weeks of silent disruption, the damage could no longer be ignored. Trade routes were unstable, defense systems unreliable, communication networks unpredictable. Nothing was fully broken, but nothing could be trusted, and without trust, no system could survive. At the Galactic Council, the situation reached a breaking point. We are losing control of the galaxy. One member said, "Not losing." Another replied quietly, "It is being taken from us." Silence filled the chamber, because now they were ready to admit what they had been avoiding. "This is human," a senior member said slowly. "They are behind all of this, but they are not breaking the law." Another argued, "No weapons, no fleets, no direct attacks. Then how do we stop them?" Someone asked. No one answered, because the answer was simple. They could not. Far away, on Earth, the control room was calm, almost peaceful. There were no alarms, no chaos, no urgency, only quiet focus. The massive display now showed something new, not just connections, but influence. Every system was marked: green for stable, yellow for partial access, red for full control, and the red zones were growing. "Phase 5 is complete," the woman reported. The man stood still, watching the display carefully. "Good," he said. "Now, it is time." "Time for what?" she asked. He looked at her, his expression serious. "Time to show them." In the center of the galaxy, inside the Council's main system, something unexpected happened. All screens suddenly went dark. Every device, every signal, every network gone. For a moment, the most powerful leaders in the galaxy sat in complete silence. Then the screens turned back on, but they were no longer under Council control. A single message appeared, clear, simple, and impossible to block. "We are not at war." The chamber froze. No one spoke, no one moved. The message continued: "We followed your rules, you banned weapons. So we put them down, you banned armies. So we disbanded them, you banned war, so we changed it." The words were calm, almost respectful, but every line carried weight. "We did not attack your fleets, we did not destroy your worlds, we only showed you the truth, that your systems are not yours, that your control is an illusion, that your peace is fragile." One council member stood up, shaking slightly. "This is an act of war," they said loudly, but the message responded instantly. "No, this is what you allowed, back on Earth." The control room remained silent as the message was transmitted across every system. Every species, every planet, every ship received it at the same time. No one could stop it. No one could block it. "This will change everything," the woman said softly. The man nodded. "Yes, they need to understand." Across the galaxy, reactions spread quickly. Some species panicked. Some tried to shut down their systems. Some demanded answers from the Council, but nothing worked, because the message was already everywhere, and more importantly, so were the humans. In one distant system, an alien commander stared at his control panel. He pressed commands again and again. Nothing responded correctly. "There. Inside everything," he whispered. His second officer looked at him in fear. "Then what do we do?" The commander slowly sat down. "We accept it," he said quietly, "because we have no choice." Back in the council chamber, the message reached its final line. "We did not break your rules. We proved they were incomplete. Then." The screens returned to normal. Control was given back. But it did not feel the same, because now, Everyone knew the truth. They were never fully in control. On Earth, the systems began to slow down, not stopping, just stabilizing. "We are reducing activity," the woman reported. "Good," the man replied. "We are not here to destroy, only to demonstrate." He looked at the fading network lines on the screen. "They thought war was about power," he said, "but it is not. It is about control, and now they understand." Far across the galaxy, ships moved carefully, planets remained alert, and every species carried the same thought. Humans had not returned to war, they had evolved beyond it. They had turned war into something invisible, something unstoppable, something that did not need destruction to win. And for the first time in history, the galaxy realized something truly terrifying. The most dangerous enemy is not the one that attacks you, it is the one that controls everything. Without fighting at all. The message ended, but its impact did not. It spread deeper than any weapon ever could. Into thoughts, into trust, into fear. For the first time, the galaxy was not afraid of human strength. It was afraid of human silence, across countless systems. Leaders gathered in private rooms, not to plan war, but to ask one question. How much control do we still have? No one could answer with certainty, because every system they depended on had already been touched. Ships still moved, planets still functioned, trade still continued. But now, every action carried doubt. Was it truly their command, or something allowed by humans? In one advanced alien capital, the central command tower stood tall, a symbol of control and order. Inside, the highest officials monitored their systems closely. Every signal was checked, every command verified. "We have isolated our network," one officer reported. "No external access." The leader nodded slowly. "Good." For a moment, there was relief. Then, a screen flickered. Just once, a single line appeared, and disappeared so fast it was almost missed. Isolation is also a system. Silence filled the room. The officer stepped back. Fear, clear in his eyes. "They are still here," he whispered. "Far away, on a distant colony world." Things were different. There were no advanced systems, no powerful defenses. Only simple machines, and basic communication. For the first time in weeks, everything worked perfectly. No errors, no delays, no strange behavior. The people felt safe, but that safety brought a new fear. If humans could control the most advanced systems, did that mean they were choosing not to control the simple ones? And if so, why? Back on Earth, the control room was quieter than before. The massive network still existed, but its activity had slowed. Humans were no longer expanding. They were observing galaxy. "Responses within expected range," the woman reported. "Fear levels are increasing." The man stood still, watching data flow across the screen. "Good," he said calmly. "Fear leads to awareness, and awareness leads to change." A young analyst looked uncertain. "But what if they decide to fight back?" he asked. The man turned slightly. "With what?" he replied. "They cannot fight what they cannot see, and they cannot trust what they cannot control." In the Galactic Council, the situation had become tense. Every member now spoke carefully. Every decision was questioned. "We must regain control," one member said. "Or at least the appearance of it," another added. A third member leaned forward. "We need to communicate with humans." The chamber went silent. Because this idea, once unthinkable, now felt necessary. "They have already communicated with us," someone replied. "Yes," the third member said. "But now we ask the questions." At that moment, their main system glitched again. Not a failure, just a reminder. The message was clear. Humans were listening, in multiple systems. Fleets began to reduce activity, ships moved slower, weapons remained inactive, because every commander understood one thing: Aggression could trigger something worse. Something invisible, something unstoppable. In one military outpost, a young officer spoke quietly to his captain. "Why are we not preparing defenses?" The captain looked at the stars outside. "Because defenses are useless," he said. "If the enemy is already inside," the officer lowered his head, understanding the truth in those words. Back on Earth, a new report appeared. Multiple systems are attempting full shutdown, the woman said. "They are disconnecting everything." The man watched carefully. "Let them," he said. "They will learn." Minutes later, results came in. Disconnected systems faced new problems. No communication, no coordination, no stability. They were safe from outside influence, but also completely alone. "They cannot survive without connection," the woman said, "and connection is where we exist." The man nodded slightly. "That is the lesson." He looked at the network again. "We are not their enemy," he said quietly. "We are their reality now." Across the galaxy, the same conclusion formed in different minds. Humans were no longer just a species, they were a presence. A silent force that could touch everything, change everything, control everything. Without being seen, without being stopped, fear spread deeper, not loud, not chaotic, but quiet and constant. The kind of fear that never leaves, because it does not come from outside. It lives inside your own systems, inside your own control, inside your own trust. At the Galactic Council, a final decision began to form. Not about war, but about survival. "We cannot remove them," one member said slowly. "And we cannot fight them," another added. "Then what do we do?" A long silence followed. Then one voice spoke. "We accept them." The words felt heavy, but also true, because for the first time, the galaxy understood something important. Humans had not taken control by force. They had taken control by understanding systems, understanding connections, understanding weakness, and most importantly, understanding fear. Back on Earth, the man closed his eyes for a moment. As if listening to something far away, "They are learning," he said softly. The woman looked at him, and when they fully understand, she asked. He opened his eyes. "Then this war ends," he said, "because they will realize it was never a war to begin with." Fear changed the galaxy, but fear alone was not enough. Sooner or later, someone would try to resist, and this time, they did. Deep within the core systems, a secret meeting took place, not in the open halls of the Galactic Council, but in a hidden chamber, cut off from every known network. No signals, no connections, no external systems, only direct, physical controls. For the first time in centuries, leaders from the most powerful species gathered. Offline, they did not trust their own technology anymore. And that alone proved how much had changed. "We cannot continue like this," one leader said. "We are living under invisible control." Another nodded. "They are inside everything." "Then we remove everything," a third replied. Silence followed. Because the idea was extreme, but it was also the only option left, "We rebuild," the third continued. New systems. Isolated, independent, unconnected. No shared networks, no galaxy-wide links. We return to control. Piece by piece, a fourth leader spoke carefully. "And if they find a way inside again?" The answer came slowly. "Then at least we will see them." For the first time since the beginning of this invisible war, the galaxy was planning a true countermove. Back on Earth, something unusual happened. An alert appeared on the main screen. Not an error, not a system glitch, but a pattern. A sudden drop in connections across multiple core systems. "They are disconnecting?" the woman said quickly. Large scale, the room grew quiet. The man stepped closer to the display. Lines that once filled the galaxy began to fade. One by one, systems went dark, not destroyed, just Gone from the network. They are learning faster than expected, Summer whispered. The man remained calm. Yes, he said, they are adapting. Should we stop them? The woman asked. He shook his head slowly. No, let them try. In the core systems. The operation had already begun. Old networks were shut down completely. Communication returned to direct signals. Ships used local controls instead of shared systems. Everything became slower, but also independent. For the first time since human influence spread, some areas of the galaxy were truly free from it, at least. For now, we have control again, one leader said with relief. Our systems respond instantly, no delays. No interference. Another leader looked at the reports. For now, he said quietly, because deep down, they all knew. This was only the beginning, back on Earth. The control room continued to monitor the changes. Disconnected systems are stable, the woman reported. No access from our side. A young analyst looked worried. If they fully isolate, we lose everything. The man turned toward him. No, he said calmly, we lose nothing. He pointed at the screen. They are creating new systems, and new systems, and new systems. Have new weaknesses? The analyst slowly understood. They are starting over, he said. Yes. The man replied, and that makes them predictable again, in the isolated systems. Confidence slowly returned. Fleets regained proper control. Commands worked perfectly. Leaders began to believe they had found a solution. We can rebuild without them, one declared. We do not need their network. For a moment, it felt like victory. Then, something small happened. In one isolated system, a newly built control unit paused for a second. Just 1 second. Then it continued normally. The engineers checked everything. No error found, no signal detected, nothing unusual, but far away. On Earth, a quiet voice spoke. New entry point, confirmed. The room remained silent. The man watched the system carefully. Do not act yet, he said. Let it grow. In the following days, more isolated systems experienced similar moments. Tiny pauses, brief delays, almost invisible. Each one ignored, because nothing seemed wrong. But something was there. Learning, adapting, waiting. Back in the hidden chamber, the leaders received new reports, minor irregularities in rebuilt systems, one officer said. Nothing serious? Another added. The first leader frowned slightly. Are we sure? Yes, the officer replied. Everything is under control. The leader looked unconvinced, because he had heard those words before, back on Earth. The network display began to change again. New lines appeared, faint at first, then stronger. They are reconnecting themselves, the woman said, without knowing. The man nodded slowly. Connection is not just technology, he said. It is dependency, and dependency always returns. In the isolated systems, the truth slowly became clear. Even without the old network, they still needed communication, still needed coordination, still needed connection, and every connection was a path that humans understood better than anyone. The countermove had begun with strength, with resistance, with hope, but now, cracks were forming again. Small, silent, invisible cracks, and through those cracks, something was already coming back, not with force, not with noise, but with patience. Because humans did not need to win quickly, they only needed to win completely. And as the galaxy tried to rebuild its control, it unknowingly opened the door once more to the one thing it could never fully escape, the silent presence of humanity. At first, it looked like success. The isolated systems were stable. Commands worked, ships moved without delay. For a brief moment, the galaxy believed it had escaped. Believed it had taken control back from the invisible force, but control built in fear does not last long, because fear creates weakness, and weakness spreads. Slowly, quietly, without warning, in one rebuilt system. A cargo route failed, not because of interference, but because of confusion. 2 stations used different timing systems. Their schedules did not match. Ships arrived too early or too late. Deliveries stopped. Supplies began to run low. Fix the timing, an officer ordered. But fixing it required connection, and connection was the very thing they had removed. In another system, a defense grid refused to activate. Not because it was hacked, but because it lacked updated data without shared networks. Information moved slowly, too slowly. By the time commands reached the system, they were already outdated. The galaxy had removed human influence, but in doing so, it had also removed its own efficiency. Back on Earth, the control room was silent. No active interference, no commands being sent, only observation. "They are collapsing," the woman said softly. The man watched the data carefully. "No," he replied, "they are failing themselves, across multiple systems." Similar problems began to appear. Trade slowed, communication weakened, coordination broke down. Nothing dramatic, no explosions, no attacks, just failure. One system at a time. Leaders tried to fix the problems. But every solution required something they no longer trusted: connection, and without connection, there was no unity in the Galactic Council. Tension reached its peak. Reports flooded in from every direction. Supply shortages in outer systems, defense failures in core regions, communication delays across multiple sectors. "We solved the human problem," one member said. "Then why are we still failing?" Another asked. No one had an answer, because the truth was difficult to accept. The problem was never just humans. The problem was dependence, and now they were trapped between 2 choices: depend on humans, or fail without them. Back in the isolated systems, frustration turned into desperation. "We need to reconnect," one commander said. "We cannot survive like this." Another shook his head. "If we reconnect, they return." "They never left," the first replied quietly. Silence followed. As everyone knew it was true, on Earth, a new report appeared. "Multiple systems requesting reconnection," the woman said. "They are trying to restore old networks?" The man nodded slowly. "They have reached the limit. Should we respond?" she asked. He paused for a moment, then spoke calmly. "No, let them choose." In system after system, the same decision was made. Reconnect, not out of trust, but out of necessity, one by one. Networks began to come back online, slowly. At first, carefully, as if expecting something to go wrong, but nothing happened. No interference, no control. Everything worked perfectly, and that was the most dangerous part, because it felt safe, it felt normal, it felt like control had returned. But deep inside the systems, something was already there, waiting, watching, understanding, back on Earth. The network display lit up again. Lines spread across the galaxy, stronger than before. More connected than ever. "They are back," the woman said. The man looked at the screen. "Yes," he replied, "and now they understand why." In the Galactic Council, the final realization began to form. "This was never about attacking us," one member said slowly. "It was about showing us something." Another nodded, "that we cannot function without connection and connection." They stopped speaking, because they did not need to finish the sentence. Everyone already knew, connection now meant humans. In the outer systems, fleets regained coordination, trade routes stabilized, defense systems responded instantly. Everything worked again, but something had changed. Control no longer felt absolute, it felt shared. And that idea created a different kind of fear, not fear of destruction, but fear of dependence, back on Earth. The control room slowly dimmed as activity reduced again. Phase 8 complete, the woman reported. The man took a deep breath. They have seen both sides, he said. Control with us. And failure without us? He looked at the glowing network. This was never about taking over. It was about becoming necessary, far across the galaxy. The final stage of collapse was not destruction, but realization. Empires did not fall in fire, they fell in understanding. Understanding that they were no longer alone in control. That their systems, their stability, their survival was now connected to something greater, something silent, something invisible, something human. And as the galaxy stood once again on stable ground, it realized something far more terrifying than war. It had not been defeated, it had been made dependent, and there was no escape from that. The galaxy was stable again, ships moved without error, systems responded instantly. Trade flowed across the stars, everything worked, but nothing felt the same, because now, every system carried a silent truth. Control was no longer absolute, it was shared, not by agreement, but by reality. Across the Galactic Council, a new kind of meeting began. There were no arguments this time. No loud debates, only quiet understanding. We cannot remove them, one member said. And we cannot ignore them, another added. A third member leaned forward slowly. Then we must accept them. The words were simple. But they carried the weight of an entire galaxy, for the first time. The Council was not deciding how to control humans, they were deciding how to live with them, back on Earth. The control room was calm. Almost empty compared to before. Most systems were now running automatically. The network had reached a stable state, no expansion, no disruption, only balance. They are ready, the woman said quietly. The man stood in front of the display, watching the galaxy in silence. Yes, he replied. They finally understand. Will we reveal everything? She asked. He shook his head slightly. No, only what they need to know. At that moment, across every system, every screen activated at the same time, not with force, not with interruption, but smoothly. As if it was meant to happen, a single signal spread across the galaxy, clear, controlled, and calm. This time, it was not just a message, it was a presence, a human presence. We are not your rulers. The voice said. It was steady, neutral, impossible to trace to a single person. We are not your enemies, we are not your conquerors. Across countless worlds, beings stopped what they were doing, listening, because this moment felt different, final. You believed war was about destruction? The voice continued, and so you tried to remove it, but war was never just destruction, it was control, influence, and survival. In the council chamber, no one spoke, they simply listened, because now they understood. You removed humans from war, the voice said, so we changed what war means. We removed the need for weapons, we removed the need for armies. We removed the need for conflict. A pause followed, not empty, but meaningful, and in doing so, the voice continued, we created something new, across the galaxy. Systems continued to function perfectly, but now, every species could feel it. The invisible presence that connected everything. You are no longer divided, you are no longer isolated, you are part of a single system, a system that cannot fall. Because it is shared, one council member finally spoke, his voice low. And what are we in this system? He asked. For a moment, there was silence, then the answer came. You are partners. The word echoed across the chamber. Not rulers, not subjects, partners. Back on Earth, the woman looked at the man. They will not like that, she said. He gave a small, calm smile. They do not have to like it, he replied. They only have to understand it, across different systems. Reactions varied. Some accepted it quickly, some resisted in silence, some feared what it truly meant. But none could deny the truth. The galaxy worked better this way. Stronger, faster, more stable. And that stability came from one source: human design. In the outer systems, a fleet commander looked at his control panel. Everything responded perfectly, every command executed instantly. For the first time in his life, he felt complete control, and yet he knew it was not entirely his. He leaned back slowly. "We are not in charge anymore," he said quietly. His officer looked at him. "Then who is?" The commander paused, then answered, "No one, or everyone, back in the council." The final decision was made, not through votes, not through power, but through acceptance. "The new order is stability," one member said, "and humans are part of that stability." Another added, "No one disagreed, because they could not. Because they had already seen both sides, chaos without connection, and control with it, back on Earth." The network display slowly dimmed, not because it was ending, but because it no longer needed to be watched. It had become self-sustaining. "Balanced, complete, this is it," the woman said softly. The man nodded, "Yes. The war is over." He looked at the stars one last time. "But we did not win by fighting," he added. "We won by becoming necessary." Far across the galaxy, peace finally existed. Not because war had been banned, but because war had been transformed into something invisible, something controlled, something shared. And as the galaxy entered this new era, it understood one final truth: humans had not taken over. They had become the system itself. The galaxy was quiet, not the empty silence of fear, but a calm, steady quiet. The kind that comes after something has ended, or perhaps after something new has begun. For the first time in its long history, the galaxy was stable. No sudden conflicts, no system failures, no hidden chaos. Everything worked together perfectly. And that was something no one had ever experienced before. Across countless worlds, life continued as normal. But there was a difference, a feeling that could not be ignored. The feeling that something greater was always there. Watching, balancing, guiding, not controlling every action, but ensuring nothing fell apart. At the center of it all, the Galactic Council gathered one final time, not for war, not for control, but for understanding. "We must define this," one member said slowly. "What we have become," another nodded. "This is no longer the galaxy we once knew," a third looked around the chamber. "Then we ask the only ones who can answer." No one argued, because the answer was obvious: humans. At that exact moment, every system across the galaxy responded, not with disruption, not with force, but with perfect timing. Every screen, every signal, every interface activated smoothly. A single presence filled the network. Familiar, calm, undeniable. The human voice returned, not louder, not stronger, but clearer than ever before. "You called for us," it said. The council remained silent, listening, because now they knew how to listen. "We will not speak long," the voice continued, "because everything you need to understand, you have already seen, across the galaxy, being stopped and focused. Even those who once resisted, because this felt important, final. You tried to remove war," the voice said, "and you succeeded." A pause followed, but only in the form you understood. Images began to appear on screens, not pictures of destruction, but of systems working together. Ships moving in perfect coordination. Planets sharing resources instantly, networks adapting without failure. This is what replaced it, not peace alone, but balance. In the council chamber, one member leaned forward. "And what ensures this balance?" he asked. The answer came without delay. "Understanding," another member spoke. "And if that understanding fails?" The voice paused for a moment, then responded, "It will not. because it is no longer held by one species. It is shared across the galaxy. The truth became clearer. This system was not controlled by force, not enforced by fear, but maintained by connection, a connection that humans had built, and everyone now depended on. "We are not your leaders," the voice said. "We are not above you. We are within the system, as you are." Back on Earth, the control room was almost empty now. Most of the work was done. Most of the systems ran without human input. The man stood alone, listening to the message being delivered. His expression calm, satisfied. "This was never about power," the voice continued. "It was about survival. Yours and ours." Far away, in a distant system, a young alien child looked at a screen, watching the message with wide eyes. "What are humans?" The child asked softly. An elder beside them thought for a moment, then answered, "They are the reason everything still works." Back in the council, the final question was asked. If this is not war, then what is it? For the first time, the voice seemed almost human. Not just calm, but thoughtful. "It is evolution." The word echoed across every system, not loud, but deep. "You feared what we could do in war, so you tried to stop us? But in doing so, you forced us to become something else. Something you did not expect." A final pause filled the galaxy. Then the last message came, clear, simple, unforgettable. "You banned us from war. So we became the war itself." The screens slowly returned to normal. The presence faded, but it did not disappear. Because it was still there, in every system, every connection, every moment of stability, the council sat in silence. Not in fear, but in understanding. Because now they finally saw the truth. War had not been destroyed. It had been transformed into something that did not destroy worlds, but protected them, not through force, but through balance. Across the galaxy, life continued, peacefully, but not weakly. Because beneath that peace was something powerful, something constant, something human, and for the first time in history, that was enough.